Welcome. Thanks for joining me in this clip, this short talk, lecture about what's it like to make media professionally. I'll be talking today about two specific things. First, on the best way to understand what working in the media is really like, which is ambivalence. So I'm going to sort of unpack all the different ways in which the experience of working in the media, of being a journalist, being a musician or a music producer, working in advertising or marketing communications in film and television or in the production of digital games, how that feels like as a series of ambivalences. And second, I'm going to look at the recent literature on media and production studies to unpack a little bit of the explanations of why things the way they are in the media. How come is the media, and specifically is work in the media, organized the way it is today? How have the different disciplines that study work in the media and media production and media management and media ownership, how have they contributed to our current understanding of what media work is really like? Bridging, if you will, the world of experience and practice with the world of theory and research. So let's dive in. In Making Media, the book that I edited together with my friend and colleague Mirjam Prenger for Amsterdam University Press, a lot of different concepts come into play when we talk about what's it like to make media. One of our former students made this sort of word map shaped in a heart because, of course, fundamentally, making media is a form of effective labor, a form of work that involves all of us, our heart and soul, our passions, our drive, but also our need to make a living, to survive, to make it work. And all of that comes together in this book and in this issue, in a way of studying what's it like to really make media. And today I'm going to focus on the different ambivalences that sort of benchmark the experience of what's it like to work in media from the perspective of what the great Tim Gunn in the lovely reality television show Project Runway would always say to candidates if they were, panicking about what to do with their creative project. He would just say, make it work. Okay. How do media professionals make it work? Well, in that sense, the best way to answer that question is to answer it in terms of a series of ambivalences. The ambivalence between work as empowering while at the same time being exploitative. The work as being pleasurable yet precarious, based on a sense of freedom to do what you want to do, but also being utterly and completely dependent on all kinds of structural issues. Being creative, but producing within the context of industry. Making art and having to sell product. Being on or just waiting around, waiting for your next gig or contract, being off. Being part of an incredibly diverse and exciting community, which is also really homogeneous, having real impact, and at the same time being totally disconnected from the audience. So those are the ambivalences that I'm going to unpack in this particular talk. First off, media work as both empowering and exploitative. I mean, work is often experienced in the media as empowering because you get to tell your own story. You get to put your heart and soul into an amazing product. Let's say you're part of a production of a great film that you really believe in, of a game that you think will be, a great experience for players, of a news story that will truly inform people and enable them to be active citizens in their democracy, that really contributes to what people need to know about the world they live in. So empowering. And that's, of course, a major draw to this industry. But it's also exploitative. Stories about exploitation, about workers being not paid or underpaid, about people being truly exchangeable in the industry are paramount. I mean, it's no surprise, regrettably so, that the Me Too movement really picked up once people from the media industry started talking about it online. I mean, one of the first people who called upon her colleagues to share stories about exploitation as a woman experienced in their field of work was a Hollywood film actress. And of course, some of the most high profile cases in the Me Too era, Harvey Weinstein, Kevin Spacey, among others, involved people in the media industry. So yes, the exploitation of women, the lack of minority representation in media industry, again with reference to the American media, you may remember the hashtag Oscars So White campaigns to complain about the lack of African American representation among nominees at the Oscars. And this is just the United States, a very visible media industry for sure, but this is going on all over the world. A second era of ambivalence is how the work is profoundly pleasurable. It's fun to work in media. Let's be honest, it's fun. I mean, it's quite common to find media work environments to be sort of very informal. You don't have to wear a suit to come to work. You're generally with like-minded people, also people from the same socioeconomic background, the same sort of age and lifestyle and life phase. You know, you hang out after work. There's good parties. There's drinks. It's a great vibe. You're contributing to something that everybody feels passionate about. It's not uncommon to hear media workers say, "Oh, I can't believe I'm getting paid to do this." It's obviously fun. Yet, at the same time, it's profoundly precarious. Even the top media performers are often only as good as the last thing they did. They work from project to project, from contract to contract. Everything is temporary, everything is fleeting, nothing is secure. If you're in the media, not just for freelancers and independent workers, but also for people who are under permanent employment, because they see colleagues left and right being fired and let go, often for no other reason than, budget cuts. So pleasure and precarity going hand in hand. The next ambivalence that truly speaks to the lived experience of what it's like to make media professionally is this delicate balance between being free and being dependent. On the image, you see Casey Neistat, which is a very popular vlogger with his own channel on YouTube, often reflecting in his videos on the life of being an independent vlogger, of doing things without corporates backing, a self-made man, DIY, truly free. Yet, Casey, just like everybody else on YouTube, is utterly and completely dependent on how YouTube manages and polices its algorithm and its video feed. If YouTube changes the algorithm and the way it rewards creators that publish on its platform every week, and nobody has anything to say about that. And in order to get followers and to get views and to get likes and to get people to comment, you have to go through an extraordinary amount of work on a daily basis to make that happen. So there is that freedom that is not just for vloggers, but that is experienced by a lot of people who work in the media, who would tell you, if you would interview them, I choose this work because of the autonomy it gives me to tell my own story, or to contribute to the telling of stories that I find important, whether those stories are news stories or advertising campaigns or television shows or whatever. But at the same time being utterly and completely dependent on clients and employers, on technologies, on algorithms, on all those kind of things. So there's that balance between those two elements in the work. The Marvel Cinematic Universe is one of many examples of distinctly commercial corporate franchises that are obviously produced to rake in the multi-million dollar bucks, right? To generate big profits. They're like industrial cookie cutter formulaic movies. Yes, absolutely. But if you speak to any of the 300 to 500 people that work on movies like this, they're not there to, rake in the big bucks, generally speaking. They truly believe in the creative potential of the work. They invest in a lot. They call these movies their little babies, right? And this is a large-scale example of a small-scale experience that media workers have, where they feel that they do this kind of work because it appeals to their sense of creativity, of being creative, of engaging in the craft, of making something beautiful, while at the same time, pretty much all of them, one way or another, well, at the very least have to make ends meet. Or even more so, work at the behest of clients or employers or contractors that need to earn money, that are in the business of making something commercial. Whether you're a journalist or, one of the actors or the extras or a carpenter working on the set of a Marvel movie, you're stuck with that same ambivalence. Here's another ambivalence. The ambivalence between creating art and creating something that sells. In an ideal world, those two things go hand in hand. In the real world, not always. Creating art for art's sake is a beautiful romantic ideal. And at the same time, we cannot and should not forget, especially as media professionals, as well as media scholars, that all media industries are ultimately industries that serve markets. And that market logic, to some extent, determines the choices being made. So we would love to think that it's just about the art. And the art could be the writing of a hard-hitting investigative journalism piece, as much as creating a gorgeous-looking television series for HBO, or an advertising campaign can also be a form of art. I mean, talk to the creatives within advertising agencies. Certainly, they feel that they're creating something beautiful, something memorable, something real. But at the same time, in a way, it's all about the money as well. Now, in a perfect world, these values align, but often they create, ambivalences. Media workers have to find a balance in their lives between being switched on and switched off. What that means is that most media workers experience their work as a series of gigs, projects, short-term forms of contracted labor, and then periods of nothing. In film and television, that is called to be on hiatus, which is where you wait in between, for example, seasons of television shows to hear if you're going to be called back on set, if your contract for the next year is being honored, if you're deemed worthy to return to work. But pretty much we see this all around, that the age-old distinction between people who are either freelancers or contracted employees is disappearing. And the most people are somewhere in the middle, balancing, juggling, spinning plates that involve project-based works, gigs, short-term contracts, client stuff, speculative work, work that you do for free in the hope to be paid for it later, and doing that sort of constantly, creating an interesting, almost cascade, if you will, of ambivalences. If you're a media professional, you're part of an interesting community that is both diverse and homogeneous at the same time. The pictures you're seeing are some older pictures from workers at a company called Weta Digital. Weta Digital is a digital effects workshop of Peter Jackson located in Wellington, New Zealand. And they were responsible for the fabulous work on, for example, Gollum in the Lord of the Rings franchise, and or Smaug in the Hobbit franchise. So fabulous digital effects studio. They have this culture of what is called formal Fridays, which on Friday, everybody shows up for work like they work in an office. Like all of a sudden, everybody has suits on and dresses all nice and with ties and everything. And then they go crazy and have drinks together. And it's lovely. And it speaks to, this notion that media work isn't really work, right? Because we're not dressed for it. We just have, like me, just a t-shirt, and we're all informal and we're all buddies and we're all in it for the beautiful art that we're creating. And that's absolutely true. And that makes for a lovely, energetic, diverse crowd of people that have singular idiosyncratic personalities, and that kind of idiosyncrasy is often celebrated, right? It's considered as the source of creativity in the media industry. At the same time, we know from the research that the media industries have a profound problem with diversity. That they are the people who make it work in the media industry tend to be people from the upper middle classes in society that have privileged backgrounds compared to a lot of other people that often do not come from minority backgrounds. That industries are dominated by men, especially in top level decision-making positions. So this is the ambivalence, right? That it is this beautiful, diverse, very liberal, progressive, sort of anything goes kind of, hey, we're not wearing suits kind of crowd. But it's also, yeah, we're kind of all the same crowd. And there's also an ageist and ableist element in this. In media and cultural studies, we call this the intersectionality, where there's a direct link between not just your gender, but also your ability. I mean, how many media workers can come to work in a wheelchair? Virtually zero. Your ability, your age. I mean, how many professional media workers are there over the age of 35 in the game industry, in the movie industry, in the film industry? I mean, relatively few. And so on and so forth. And those elements are connected. And that is what intersectionality refers to. So a media professional workforce that is both diverse in a way, but also incredibly homogeneous. Another ambivalence is this ambivalence between, look, what motivates a lot, if not most, media professionals is the desire, the passion to have impact with your work. And impact could be many different things, like, a DJ at a festival, having everybody going, woo, dancing. Impact can mean many different things. It could also mean, your news story topples a government. It could be your advertising campaign makes people 30 years later say, just do it. Yeah, I know what that's about. Your movie makes people cry, makes people scared, makes people laugh, right? That's impact. And that's beautiful. That suggests this deliberate, conscious relationship with your audience, with your community, with people you're trying to move. At the same time, we know from our research that there's a profound disconnect between media professionals and their audiences. That audiences are often imagined rather than real for media professionals. That what they say about the audience is whatever makes them feel good is not necessarily based on any real relationship that they have with their audience. That despite all the data they have access to, that their decision making is preferably not based on what they know about the audience, but what they know about their colleagues. So there is this deep disconnect between professionals and audiences that, to some extent, you could argue is a good thing. It's part of the autonomy of a creator, of an artist. And to some extent, it's a problematic thing. It's like you don't really know who or what you're doing this for. So there's another interesting ambivalence in that sort of creeps in to everything that is related to media work. So a series of profound ambivalences that make up the reality of what's it like to work in the media, that, at the ground level, if you want to work in the media, have to sort of find your way through I mean, there's no clear answer. There's no yes or no to any of these ambivalences. That's why they are ambivalent, right? It is a constant negotiation. And your agency lies in your ability to recognize the different ambivalences that come across your way as a media professional or as somebody studying media professionals. In conclusion, let's look at the scholarship for a little bit closer. I mean, in the last couple of decades, scholarship on media production, media work has mushroomed, has blossomed, has exploded. It's a beautiful thing. Sociologists, geographers, people in cultural and media studies, psychologists, anthropologists, economists, everybody is doing research on media work for a wide variety of reasons that I won't go into right now. What is interesting is to ask the question, why? Not just why are people studying the media, but why are things in media the way they are? Why are there such ambivalences? Why is the media industry structured the way it is? Why are things so wonderful and so fucked up in the media industry? In other words, how do these different disciplines in the university, at research units, how do they contribute to our understanding, our ability to answer the question, why are the things the way they are? So I will very briefly go across the different answers that different traditions in media production studies have come up with. In cultural studies and sociology, the political economy approaches, in business and management studies, in media policy studies, geographers, and of course, media studies. So cultural studies and sociology generally suggests that, what truly explains the way things are in the media industry is at the heart of everything, the notion that media work is a form of effective labor. That means that, for example, why would people accept exploitation and precarity? Why would people totally be fine with being not paid for work and still give it all they've got and more, right? It's because work to them is so much more, not just because it's meaningful, although that's a very powerful aspect of it, but because their entire being is involved in the work. In order to make it work in the media, it's not just about you and your skills and competences, it's also about who you are, your tastes, right? Your ability to sense what people would like, your communication skills, your personality. Right? All of that is involved, not just in order to fit in as a media professional, but also to be able to package and promote and sell whatever you're doing to an audience, to tickle your audience's affect at the same time. So effective labor really encapsulates all the different aspects of what it's like to work in the media. And it's a concept that comes to us through rich studies in cultural studies and sociology specifically. Political economy approaches, that is a way of thinking about media that you see in lots of different fields, suggests us to follow the money. It helps us to understand that whoever has or doesn't have power anywhere in the media industry can be largely explained by whoever has access to finance and resources, who pays the bills. And political economy also helps us explain that the money in the media industry today isn't to be found at the creator side, the production side, also not at the consumer side, but in the distribution side. That's where the real money is today. And of course, distribution of media today is completely dominated by internet platforms, by the Facebooks and Tencents of this world, which are non-media companies. So the crazy thing is that today we spend more time with media and the products and services of media companies than ever before in history, but the media industry isn't reaping the benefits of that. Business and management studies spend a lot of time talking about media in terms of and helping us explain that although people enter the media industry with this passion, with this, they see their work as a form of effective labor, they are called upon to think of their work in those kind of terms. that you should care more about how it feels what you're doing than, what's in your contract, if you will. Whereas because of the enormous technological and economical pressures on the media industry, in part because they're losing their revenue and their traditional business models to people and the companies involved in distribution, the platforms, the business rationale, the management style of media industries becomes increasingly rationalized and is pushing towards their version of what is generally referred to as a weightless economy, which in terms of media industry means an economy without workers. What that means is that more greater and greater percentage of media professionals, like I told you earlier, do not work in a contracted basis. They work from gig to gig, from project to project. They are interchangeable. Right? The core of employees of a media company gets smaller and smaller, whereas more and more work gets outsourced, subcontracted, and projectized. Flexibilized, if you will. And business and management studies help us explain the shift towards a weightless economy and increasingly rationalized model of management of these kind of companies. Policy and regulation suggests that the media industry has blossomed in part because over the history, especially in the 20th century, it has so successfully lobbied for deregulation, in order for removing limits for media companies to merge and acquire each other, to form big corporations, to bypass traditional labor laws, to prevent unionization, for all kinds of things. Deregulation was always the holy grail, except for one thing, which is copyrights. Copyrights is the exact opposite. When it comes to copyrights, media companies are aggressively lobbying for more regulation. Another ambivalence for you in terms of policy. And so in other words, policy studies really help us explain this dual position that media industries have between, on the one hand, this hourglass structure of massive multinational corporations on the one hand, tiny little companies on the other hand. And on the and secondly, which has enabled this workforce shape of the workforce through deregulation, and then this overemphasis on regulating copyrights, which allow media companies to keep earning income and revenue on the basis of work that was produced 10, 20, 30, 50, 100 years ago. Geographers help us explain why media industry are clustered in different parts of the world, why all broadcasting studios are generally across the street from each other, why advertising agencies line up one street in every big city, why media professionals tend to all hang out in the same bars on Friday afternoon. And they explain that in part this has to do with the precarity of work in these industries, and that these companies are constantly hiring and firing employees, and it makes sense therefore that they're pretty much across the street from each other. And because of the project-based nature of work in these industries, media professionals have to be close to each other, to network, to get to know each other, to hire each other onto jobs. And those are just two of the many dynamics that geographers talk about and study when they study how work is organized in the media industries. So here you see how these different fields of scholarship contribute to our understanding and our theorizing of what making media is really like. And I would argue that what media studies as a discipline does is bring all of this together. I'll be honest, up until the beginning of the 21st century, the media studies as a field did not study media production as much. Of course, there have been fabulous studies of media work dating back to the 1950s, early studies on what work in Hollywood was really like. But those studies were often conducted by anthropologists, by sociologists, by economists, and only much later did media scholars sort of pick this up, often starting with sociologies of work in journalism and then expanding to other industries. And today, there's a very rich field of research, often referred to as production studies, in media studies, within media studies, that brings all of this together. And that is where the insights in this short talk come from. So I hope this talk has illuminated a little bit about what it's like to work in the media, how media workers experience the ambivalence of their work, and how scholarship and research, how the academy has contributed to helping us explain just a little bit better why things are the way they are in the world of making media. My name is Mark Deuze, professor at the University of Amsterdam. Please reach out to me online any way, shape, or form, and I look forward to seeing you another time.